Millionaire discovers his black adopted daughter eating dog food. Her inspiring words transform. Thomas Reed, a titan of Silicon Valley, stepped into the spacious kitchen of his sprawling mansion with his mind still tangled in corporate jargon, stock numbers, and ambitious projections. The luminous fixtures cast shadows that danced eerily against glossy surfaces, but the glow could not illuminate the cavern of isolation he often felt. As a tech entrepreneur, he was used to calculating risks, forging paths, and spinning a web of success with his vast wealth. Yet, despite all he had achieved, there was a relentless void inside, an emptiness that lingered like the smell of burnt toast. In the corner, he paused, his breath hitching. There, curled tightly on the cold floor, was Maya, his 10-year-old daughter, quietly consuming the dog food meant for Max, their golden retriever. Thomas's heart lurched violently. Embarrassment washed over him as he struggled to process the absurdity of the scene. Gourmet meals lined the refrigerator. Yet, here was his daughter, reduced to devouring kibble. What could possibly lead her to this? The starkness of the moment pierced through his surface-level concerns and drew him into an abyss of disquiet. "Maya," he exclaimed, voice trembling, "why would you eat that?" The question slipped out with a desperation he didn't hide, an urgency that stemmed not from concern for her health, but from a deep-seated fear, recognition of his inadequacy. She glanced up, eyes glistening with confusion, shame, and the unmistakable stirrings of hunger, not for food, but for acceptance. Her small frame trembled as she put the bowl aside, and tears spilled unceremoniously down her flushed cheeks. "I don't feel like I'm enough for you, Dad. I thought maybe if I could just be something simple, something you expect." Her voice cracked, and every word tugged painfully at the thin veil of his professional facade. The weight of her fears crashed over him, a tempest he had refused to acknowledge for far too long. In that moment, the boardrooms and victories felt mocking in their grandeur. Thomas felt his world of structured timelines and revenue streams falter under the gravity of true connection. How could he have let work overshadow his daughter, who in her vulnerable honesty laid bare the truth of their relationship? Could he reconcile this vision of success he had built, so towering and immaculate, with the fragile humanity woven into the fabric of their bond? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Thomas, you're out there making all these things happen, and I just thought maybe you wouldn't want me around. I'm just different. Her words dripped with anguish, yet there was a quiet strength battling against the current of her insecurities. The realization clawed at him with ferocity. Maya saw herself through the dim lens of his success, unable to bridge the chasm between them. He fought back a wave of desperation. He couldn't lose her to this relentless cycle of doubt. The night stretched long and quiet, full of unresolved questions that hung thick in the air. Thomas could hardly bear the thought of navigating a world where his brilliance eclipsed the person he loved most. Would he be enough for her? Could he replace the barriers with the vulnerability she craved? The tension electrified the space between them, a truth left unspoken that stirred deep within Thomas, leaving tumultuous echoes of his cherished daughter and an uncertain future as they sat amidst the wreckage of their concealed fears and emotional turmoil. The stillness of that night felt like an indictment. As he sat across from Maya, her fragile frame illuminated by the cool light of the kitchen, Thomas's mind unfurled in chaotic spirals. He thought of his aspirations, takeovers, landmark deals, the chase for ever greater innovation. But now those ambitions clashed violently with the raw truth radiating from his daughter. His relentless pursuit of success had built walls, and he had inadvertently trapped himself inside a cage of accomplishments that felt increasingly hollow. Maya leaned over, her small hands clutching the edge of the table, a ceaseless tremor running through her fingers. "I just wish you saw me." Her words struck like a volatile shockwave, and he realized that in his quest to build an empire, he had neglected the heart of his own household. Instead of building a panorama of love, he had fashioned a facade of fortune. He had to confront this reality head-on. With a surge of determination, Thomas pushed aside the guilt that loomed heavily on his chest. It was time to make a choice, to redefine what success meant to him, not just in terms of profit margins and product launches, but in the context of family and emotional connection. He needed to embrace the vulnerability that Maya yearned for. "Maya, I'm so sorry," he said gently, pained tenderness coating his voice. "I haven't been the father you deserve. Can we start over?" Her gaze lifted, cautiously hopeful. Start over? Yes, it's not just about the big, shiny things. It's about being there for each other. I want to know you better. I want to be your dad, not just the guy who pays the bills. In that moment, he made a silent vow to put her first. But realizations often come with growing pains. The journey to rebuild their relationship demanded more than just words. It necessitated actions steeped in authenticity. That night, Thomas sat deep in thought, devising a plan. It was one thing to express his desire for change. It was another to implement it. He recalled previous employees seeking his mentorship, pouring themselves into company culture, standing up for their ideas. Yet here was his daughter, the most precious venture of his life, and he had been wholly absent. Desperation bred clarity. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts. He hesitated on the entry for the life coach who had always shared unconventional insights. Their conversations had revolved around professional hurdles, but what if they could pivot? What if he could learn strategies that applied to personal growth as well? With a furrowed brow, he pressed call. Each ring sparked a mild wave of anxiety, but he felt reckless with purpose. "Maya," he called, stealing his daughter's attention. "How about we plan a special day together, just the two of us? We could explore what you love, things you want to try." An incandescent smile broke through her uncertainty, a light breaking through the clouds of worry. "Really? I'd like that." For the first time, as they began to plan their time, the heaviness in Thomas's chest lightened. He glanced at Maya, feeling the sharp edges of their journey soften. But beneath that hope, a burgeoning recognition simmered. This was only the start. The complexities of their bond would require more than 2 hours of brunch or a visit to an amusement park. He was on the verge of a breakthrough, yet lingering questions coiled around his heart. Was he truly equipped to dismantle the barriers he had created? The phone call connected. As the life coach answered, a wave of vulnerability washed over him. With this conversation, a new leg of his journey commenced, one that would challenge him in ways he had never faced. "I'm ready," he declared softly, "to learn." And in the quiet corner of his mind, another realization rooted deeper. What if Maya, with her purity of spirit and insights, held the key to unlocking deeper wisdom for him? He felt a growing anticipation, an exploration beyond mere fatherhood into shared growth. What other secrets did Maya hold? And just how transformative could this familial journey prove to be? As the call progressed, the lines between personal and professional began to blur, leaving Thomas standing on the brink of a revelation. Thomas leaned against the kitchen counter, heart racing as he listened to the life coach. Each word peeled away layers of pretense, exposing vulnerable aspects of his life he had long buried. The coach's questions were piercing, forcing Thomas to confront not just his failures as a father, but also the distorted definitions of success he had embraced. Success isn't just what you achieve in your career, Thomas, the coach reminded him. It's about your relationships, your legacy. What kind of father do you want to be? The answer wasn't easy. He thought about the times he had put work ahead of everything else, times he would stay late at the office rather than attend school events or help with homework. Each choice had shifted his priorities, eroding the foundation of his relationship with Maya. I want to be present, Thomas finally admitted. I want to be the dad who really sees her, but how do I start? The coach suggested a simple yet profound tactic. Listen, truly listen to Maya. It was about more than just the words she spoke. It was about understanding her world, her feelings, her dreams. Equipped with this insight, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose formulating within him. As he hung up, Thomas's thoughts raced with planning their special day. He envisioned a series of small adventures that would coax Maya out of her shell. Painting, nature walks, maybe even a cooking class. Anything that could facilitate conversation, connection, and mutual exploration. His determination to know her better ignited his creativity. The next morning, Thomas awoke with an energy he hadn't felt in years. He sensed an urgency to act, to use this newfound awareness to build a relationship that might just salvage the time lost over the years. Yet as he prepared breakfast for Maya, anxiety gnawed at his insides. What if she didn't respond positively? What if his attempts felt forced or insincere? He pushed those fears aside, like waves lapping at a shore, reminding himself that no matter how daunting, change often begins with courageous steps forward. The door to growth was ajar, and he had to push through. Later that afternoon, Thomas picked up Maya from school, an excitement bubbling in his chest. "Are you ready for our special day?" he asked, trying to gauge her mood. Maya, with a slight tilt of her head, smiled shyly. "Yeah, I think so," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The initial activity was painting. They set up easels in the backyard, paints and brushes scattered around them like festive confetti. Thomas seized the moment. "You can pick any subject you want, anything that inspires you," he encouraged. She hesitated, the normally vibrant spark in her eyes momentarily dimmed by shyness. "I don't know. I'm not as good as you." "That's not the point, Maya," he replied earnestly. "It's about having fun and expressing yourself. I'm learning that it's perfectly okay to be imperfect." Slowly she picked up a brush, hesitation flickering away like dawn breaking over the horizon. As they painted together, laughter bubbled up between them, refreshing like a cool spring breeze. Maya described a vision of the world through her colors. Eagles soaring, flowers blooming, and waves crashing against rocks. In those moments, Thomas began to envelop the deeper layers of Maya's character. Her brilliance seeped through every brushstroke, and for the first time he felt what it meant to truly connect, not as a provider, but as a partner in creation and discovery. Yet, buried beneath that joy, the nagging question remained, could he sustain this connection? Would he have the strength to consistently show up for her, even when the chaos of his professional life clawed for dominance? As they wrapped up their painting session, the gravity of that question hung in the air. The day had been a success, but Thomas knew this was merely the beginning. Changes had to become rituals, not just fleeting moments in time. "What's our next adventure?" Maya asked, her enthusiasm a warm light. His heart pounded again, but this time with clarity. "I want to hear all about your favorite things," he responded, the words forming a promise. But deep inside, could he truly balance such a life, melding the worlds of fatherhood and the high-stakes business environment? As he processed these emerging thoughts, another realization began to loom above him like a looming wave. The intricacies of running a company had always been daunting, but navigating fatherhood felt like a different kind of business altogether, one he was only just beginning to explore. What unforeseen challenges lay ahead, and how would he adapt? The answer lurked just beyond the horizon, tempting him towards uncharted emotional territory, the moment when he would come face to face with his greatest fears in the quest for genuine connection with Maya. The following week took on a rhythm that felt foreign yet exhilarating for Thomas. His resolve to strengthen his relationship with Maya translated into small victories in everyday interactions. Each day, he made a conscious effort to carve out time to listen, to hear everything that lay beneath her words. The trepidation that had once settled in his stomach began to dissipate as he engaged with her more meaningfully. One evening, as they sat on the couch post-dinner, Maya spoke about her day at school. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she recounted a science project about the solar system. Thomas noticed the way her hands moved, illustrating her ideas as if they were celestial objects taking flight. It hit him. This was the essence of connection he sought. He hadn't just opened the door to her world, he had begun to understand her passion. "Can we make a model of the solar system?" she asked, a hint of hope lacing her voice. "Absolutely," he replied, enthusiasm bubbling within him. The thought of dedicating an entire weekend to her project filled him with both joy and anxiety. He envisioned late nights spent crafting planets out of foam and painting them vibrantly. It was a time investment not just in a project, but in her future, something tangible they could create together. However, that excitement was shadowed by the reality of his work life. As Thomas dove into preparations for a high-stakes business presentation, the pull of his professional obligations felt overwhelming. The presentation took precedence. Investor expectations loomed heavy. The thought of disappointing them paralyzed him, and he found himself caught in a familiar cycle of compromise. Sitting late in his office with papers scattered about, he recalled Maya's hopeful question. The dread of missing yet another weekend with her tugged at his heart. Confronted by the decision between submitting to his corporate obligations or committing to their project, Thomas wrestled with self-doubt. Was he truly committed to being present? He knew he couldn't default to what he had always done. The risk of falling into old habits weighed heavily, yet the desire to be a father who was there for such pivotal moments sparked a new resolve. "Tom, think about the message you sent her," he whispered to himself, cringing at the possibility of explaining his absence to Maya later. Would he inadvertently teach her that success meant sacrifices that hindered personal relationships? Finally, he took a deep breath and resolved to reach out to his assistant. He redirected the timeline for the meeting, informing them he needed an extra week. This decision felt liberating, a breath of fresh air after months of rigidness. As the weekend dawned, father and daughter found themselves at a craft store, shopping for materials for the solar system project. In those aisles, instead of feeling guilty about other responsibilities, he found peace. The excitement radiating from Maya sealed his earlier fears. Her laughter surrounded him like music, wrapping around his chest and coaxing out the stresses of the past week. They spent the entire weekend crafting. Maya's delight spilled over every time she explained her vision for each planet. She reveled in the process of creation, and in those moments, Thomas felt the whirlwind of joy that only comes from putting someone else first. Yet, as Monday approached, a familiar tension crept back into his mind. Could this new dynamic hold under the strain of deadlines and demands? "I can manage both," he reassured himself, but the lingering doubt crept in. Would life demand sacrifices he was unwilling to make for the sake of his daughter? As he settled into the usual routine of work after the weekend, thoughts of Maya buzzed incessantly in his mind. The blossoming connection felt precarious, and the thought of losing it terrified him. In the blurry lines between fatherhood and his career, he sensed the impending storm of a choice he would need to navigate soon, one that could define his new path. Would he be able to sustain his newfound priorities amid the persistent clamor of business life? The answers began to unfold, revealing a truth he had long denied. Success was not merely a destination, it was also a journey of maintaining balance in love and life. But looming ahead was a confrontation he hadn't anticipated. Just as he felt contentment forming in his personal life, restless feelings of doubt began to take root anew. The meeting he felt was necessary might reveal the very fissures he was trying to mend. Could he face his colleagues, a force eager to hold him captive in their drive for profit, and still protect the fragile connection with Maya? The moment had arrived when he had to reconcile ambition with heart. But before he could process it, the email pinged with news that would demand his immediate attention. What awaited him next could either shatter or solidify his careful construction of a father-daughter bond. Monday arrived with a heavy air that Thomas could hardly ignore. The weight of the day stretched before him like an untouched canvas, and the internal battle was already brewing. As he settled into his office, the familiar hum of productivity turned into a backdrop against which uncertainty played out in his mind. What had begun as a fulfilling weekend with Maya transformed into anxious apprehension about the meeting ahead. His colleagues were relentless in their pursuit of growth and profits, and every time he thought about them, it was a reminder of the relentless ambition they demanded. They thrived on deadlines, and the demands of the venture capitalists were just deeper roots of the corporate hierarchy he occupied. Pacing the sleek corridors of the office, Thomas replayed the joyous moments with Maya, the laughter, the creativity, the sense of purpose that enveloped their weekend. Yet, the juxtaposition was stark. Here, surrounded by photos of past corporate successes, he recognized that this space demanded more from him than he was willing to concede. His assistant, Jenna, knocked and entered, a stack of papers in her hands. "Tom, the investors are starting to ask about the progress reports. They're pushing for the preliminary figures by the end of the day," she noted, her tone pragmatic yet unyielding. "Can't they wait?" he asked, trying to mask his frustration. "I just need time to adjust my outlook on the presentation. There's something else at stake here." She tilted her head, a puzzled look emerging as she processed his unusual response. "You seem different, like you're conflicted." He sighed, a lock of hair falling over his brow. "Maybe I am, Jenna. Maybe I'm starting to realize that success isn't just about the bottom line." It was the first time he shared any such sentiment, and it startled him to hear his own voice articulate it so openly. Had he begun to step out of the corporate mold? "Investors won't see it that way," she cautioned, locking eyes with him while resting the folder on his desk. "They measure influence in numbers, Tom. You know that." Her words felt heavy, reminding him of the cold realities that awaited him in the coming meeting. "But what about personal influence?" he countered, perplexed at the new emphasis taking shape in his thoughts. "What if I could blend the two? What if I could still meet their expectations while valuing my relationship with Maya?" Jenna paused, her expression shifting to contemplation. "Makes sense, but it's a balancing act. Not everyone can sustain both sides." Thomas could feel the tension in his chest tighten. Could he redefine boundaries that had long ruled his life? Would an investor's disapproval outweigh the genuine connection he had begun to build with his daughter? The image of Maya, a little artist absorbed in her world of planets and stars, anchored his resolve. As he prepared for the meeting, he noted how small decisions began steering his trajectory. The conference room loomed ahead, a battleground where he'd have to confront not only his colleagues, but also the inner tug-of-war between personal welfare and professional duty. Focus on the narrative, he reminded himself, convinced that now was the time to merge his worlds. He knew he had to articulate a vision that intertwined financial success and personal authenticity. When the door swung open, Thomas stepped into the room, greeted by a sea of expectant faces and a vibe thick with tension. The stakes felt dangerously high, yet as he took a seat at the head of the table, he refused to let his anxieties dictate the meeting. He would take charge and make a statement, not just for the numbers they craved, but for the human connection that mattered more. But would they welcome this uncharted territory? The reply he would receive from his colleagues could reshape the foundations he had begun to build with Maya, and that made a realization wash over him. This confrontation was far more than just work-related. It was a test of his evolving identity, a crucial defining moment. As they began, he noticed that his footing felt less sure, the walls of the room narrowing around him, brimming with potential conflict. Whoever spoke against his inclusive viewpoint could potentially undo his bond with Maya, and therein lay the urgency of the moment. The stakes had never felt higher for both father and businessman, and Thomas could sense the relentless clash of priorities approaching. Would he stand firm, or would he yield to the relentless currents of ambition? Before he could settle, a voice broke through the equation. "Let's talk numbers," one of his colleagues said, locking gazes with him. In that succinct phrase hung the weight of his future, possibly the future of his bond with Maya. The moment of truth arrived, loaded with implications that reached far beyond the meeting room. The moment seemed suspended as Thomas stared back at his colleague, the words hanging in the air, thick with implications. Numbers, metrics, the bloodless currency of the corporate world. Each face around the table was a mirror reflecting expectations back at him, expectant and unyielding. They wanted his compliance, they wanted him to march in formation towards ever higher profit margins. "Can we not start there?" Thomas found himself saying, an unexpected edge in his voice. He felt a stirring inside, a quiet but powerful force rising against the wave of rigid expectations. "I think we should talk about what really matters to us as a team and as individuals." A ripple of confusion coursed through the room. He saw Jenna's worried expression shift to surprise. His colleagues exchanged glances, eyebrows raised, as if he had just deviated off the well-trod path they had all learned to walk. He wasn't just facing them, he was confronting an ingrained culture where human dynamics were buried beneath layers of spreadsheets. "What do you mean?" one of them finally asked, skepticism lacing their tone. Thomas hesitated for a moment, the uncertainty pressing down on him like a weight. This was the point of no return. He could feel the challenge of his own words echo in his mind. Would he risk it all by redefining success in a way that intertwined personal fulfillment with corporate goals? He took a deep breath, anchoring himself in the clarity he found over the weekend with Maya. "I think we need to consider our purpose beyond just profit." The words sounded new and foreign to him, yet invigorating. He envisioned Maya's innocent creativity, the way she transformed everyday things into whimsical drawings. What if success isn't solely about meeting our quarterly figures? What if we cultivate a culture where our impact is measured by our relationships with our clients, our community, and even our families? An unsettling quiet descended upon the room, giving way to a deep internal struggle among his colleagues. They were evaluating not just his words, but the very essence of their collective ethos. "You think that's realistic, Tom?" Another voice piped in, drawing Thomas's gaze. It was Lisa, an ambitious member of the finance team, whose skepticism could pierce steel. "We have stakeholders to answer to. Emotions have no place in business." "Sure. But what if we could channel that emotion into our work? What if caring about our impact could actually drive our profits? People are more likely to invest in businesses that resonate with them on a personal level." The words tumbled out, fervent and passionate, as they struck against the austere walls of the conference room. Thomas felt like an imposter and a prophet all at once. Each flicker of doubt threatened to undermine his resolve, yet a surge of belief countered it. Could he be a catalyst for change? The tension in the room was palpable, filled with the potential for either rejection or acceptance. Gradually, the tide began to shift. Lisa uncrossed her arms, her brow furrowing in thought. Some colleagues leaned forward, intrigued. If they could see it, the synergy of growth and compassion, perhaps they wouldn't view him as a radical, but instead as a visionary who dared to blend two worlds that seemed irreconcilable. His heart raced. What if they not only accepted his vision, but also believed in it? Would they rally behind him? The thought was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. Just as the atmosphere began to warm, a sharp voice cut through the potential camaraderie. "This isn't a touchy-feely business, Thomas. You're losing sight of reality." The harshness of the tone pulled at a thread of anxiety deep within him again, a reminder of the formidable wall between ambition and empathy he was trying to dismantle. As he prepared to defend his vision, doubt seeped into his thoughts. The meeting was becoming a crucible, testing more than just strategies, but his very identity and choices. Could he uphold his newfound perspective, or would he crumble under the weight of conventionalism that sought to pull him back into its fold? With every eye on him, the moment called him to rise. He had to convince them, potential partners, yes, but also a team worth believing in. "If I'm to lead, I can't do so without weaving authenticity into our foundation," he stated defiantly. In that moment, he was at the brink, not just of a professional endeavor, but of his transformation as a person committed to an enduring legacy for Maya. Would they embrace this narrative, or would they exile him for his convictions? As the meeting hung in the balance, Thomas sensed a pivotal choice approaching, one that could reshape not only the business's direction, but the very essence of who he had become. And as that thought reverberated within him, a new voice emerged in his mind, daring him to confront the urgency of his mission with even greater clarity. What if the criticism could be what pushed him further into his vision? The stakes were suddenly clearer. Would he ignite a revolution in their approach, or would he sacrifice his voice for the comfort of the familiar? The air hung heavy as Thomas faced the circle of scrutinizing expressions, a mixture of disbelief and intrigue etching their features. For a moment he felt unmoored, as if the identities he had meticulously built were in peril. He wasn't just a cog in a corporate machine anymore. He was redefining the purpose of their work. That realization surged through him, kindling an unanticipated resolve. "You say we're in a business," he pressed on, forcing each word to carry the weight of his intent. "But are we also not human beings? Why can't we integrate our values into our strategy? Isn't true success when we create environments where people can thrive, both financially and emotionally?" The table remained silent, but he saw a flicker of contemplation pass like lightning across faces, slowly morphing skepticism into curiosity. "Emotions, they're just distractions," Lisa countered, though her voice lacked some of its earlier force. He could sense her twisting unease, and he seized the opportunity. "That's one perspective," he acknowledged, trying to appear calm, while his heart pounded in contradiction. "But consider the brands that manage to stand out in our current landscape. They aren't solely focused on profit. They attract loyalty, passion, and community as their backbone." Jenna spoke up hesitantly. "You mean like local businesses that prioritize customer relationships?" "Exactly," Thomas shot back, a hint of excitement threading through him. "Those businesses cultivate trust. They're not simply selling products. They're selling philosophies. Wouldn't we like to be seen that way? What if we framed our company not just around numbers, but around being a trusted partner in our clients' journeys?" Thomas could see it now, the potential for transformation. The more he spoke, the stronger his conviction grew. He was navigating uncharted territory, wrestling with definitions of success that went beyond mere balance sheets. Deep down, he longed for this world to embrace his vision, to anchor their mission around meaningful growth that resonated beyond corporate walls. Yet amidst the growing engagement, the deep-rooted fear still loomed. He gathered his thoughts, planting value even as the stakes escalated. "I know we have to answer to stakeholders, but what happens if we redefine our metrics of success? What if we invest in relationships, well-being, and creativity? We would become pioneers in a space desperate for genuine connection." Chuckles and murmurs began to break the tension, some colleagues leaning back with a mix of skepticism and amusement playing across their faces. Thomas sharpened his focus. "Let's be clear," he said firmly. "This isn't about abandoning our business acumen. It's about evolving it. Think of this as a new strategy that incorporates our human side as one of its strengths, rather than an obstacle. We can achieve unprecedented stability if we learn to grow from our relationships rather than just from our profit margins." Lisa's expression shifted again, showing signs of a crack in her unwavering facade. "You really believe that can work?" she challenged, skepticism fading as a hint of intrigue surfaced. A rush of adrenaline surged through him, doubt now mingled with hope. "I don't just believe it. I've seen it. I've felt it. The companies that truly care thrive in ways we haven't even begun to explore." Silence bore down, pregnant with the tension of possibilities. His words hung in the air, suspended, waiting for acknowledgement, for the pivotal moment where collective apprehension could shift into collective understanding. Then a small voice piped up. It was Jenna, her trepidation overtaken by curiosity. "What about us? How can we as individuals make this work for ourselves?" He opened his mouth to respond, but something deeper flickered within him. Could he not only advocate for the corporate overhaul, but also inspire personal transformations within his team? It dawned on him how interconnected their journeys could be, melding purpose with professional aspirations. In that moment, he realized the crux of his challenge. Inspiring others to embrace this vision required a personal touch. How could he unveil his profound belief in this transformation amidst his colleagues? As he prepared to elaborate, he felt the familiar pang of uncertainty. The risk was significant. What if his peers didn't see the potential he envisioned? What if he stood alone, fighting an uphill battle against years of conditioning? Yet a quiet strength emerged within, stemming from the connection he felt to Maya. This was not only about changing the company, but igniting a deep-seated desire for alignment in purpose, in every person in that room. "Let me ask you this," he declared, determination resonating in his voice. "What's stopping each of you from believing that your work could bring greater meaning to your lives? What's preventing us from starting that journey together?" As the question settled, an awakening echoed through the group, a reverberation of doubts and hopes mixed together, fueling the fire of possibility, of change. But just as the momentum began to crystallize, the entry of the finance director loomed like a dark cloud over the nascent spark Thomas had ignited. It was time for reality to join the conversation, and he feared it would erupt his fragile stream of enthusiasm. The collision between ambition and corporation was imminent. How would he navigate the incoming scrutiny, and would it douse the flames, or paradoxically fan them into a wildfire of resolve? Thomas stood at the edge of his resolve as the finance director, Mr. Hargrove, stepped into the room. The air shifted, electric and dense. The promise of change now seemed fragile, teetering on the brink of examination. Hargrove looked around, his expression a blend of wariness and shrewdness, as if he were assessing an equation without known variables. "What's this about?" he barked, his voice slicing through the lingering buzz of conversation. Thomas felt the spark of inspiration he'd ignited shudder. The dialogue he had nurtured now felt vulnerable under Hargrove's authoritative gaze. Thomas took a steadying breath, gathering his thoughts. Hargrove was known for valuing metrics above all else, the very embodiment of the harsh rationalism that Thomas was challenging. "We were discussing the role of emotions in business and how our company can align our values with our strategic goals," Thomas replied, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Hargrove raised an eyebrow, the skepticism in his demeanor palpable. "Emotions? This isn't a therapy session, Thomas. We're here to make profits, not share feelings." The dismissal landed heavily. He had anticipated resistance, but Hargrove's cavalier tone felt like an attack on the fragility of his vision. Yet instead of crumbling, a surge of clarity swept through him. If he was going to foster awareness and growth within his team, he had to stand firm, even against opposition. "That's precisely the issue," Thomas responded, allowing the conviction in his voice to solidify. "We cannot ignore the human aspect of our organization. Building trust and engagement is essential to thriving in today's market. It's not merely about the numbers on a page, it's about the lives behind them." A flicker of irritation crossed Hargrove's face, but Thomas seized the moment, pushing further. "Imagine if instead of worrying solely about our profit margins, we aim to create impact, real, measurable impact in our clients' lives. Clients who will repay that investment in loyalty and advocacy." Lisa and Jenna exchanged glances, their collective tension reflected in their body language, and their curiosity slightly overshadowing Hargrove's authority. Hargrove folded his arms, a challenge flashing in his eyes. "You think this soft approach will hold up against the hard realities of our industry? Numbers are our lifeblood." "Numbers can tell half the story," Thomas replied, determination boiling just beneath his polite facade. "But the narrative we choose influences those figures profoundly. When we connect emotionally, we embed value into our processes. It's an investment that can yield unprecedented returns." Scrutiny filled the room, but there was a flicker of understanding blossoming in Jenna's eyes. Thomas knew he had to leverage this moment to transform the doubt in the air into collective assurance. "Let's reshape how we measure our success. What if we tracked not just financial growth but also employee satisfaction and client relationships? We would cultivate a more vibrant ecosystem for all." Hargrove shifted in his seat, clearly calculating his response. "Interesting thoughts, but let's not forget the reality of board meetings and stakeholders. Would they even entertain your ideas, let alone endorse them?" Thomas's breath hitched at the mention of the board. He realized the uphill battle he faced was not merely with his colleagues. It stretched into the broader corporate hierarchy. It compelled him to think beyond just the moment. He had to envision a plan that would resonate not only emotionally, but strategically with every decision-maker in the company. "What if we did a pilot project?" Thomas suggested, his heart racing. "A smaller initiative grounded in these principles with measurable outcomes. We could present results that showcase the correlation between emotional engagement and profitability." The prospects rippled around the room. Could Hargrove be persuaded? Could this new framework transcend the board's conventional views? He sensed he was teetering on the brink of something significant. Glimmers of a revolution were pulsating at the edges of their conversation. As murmurs of agreement began to echo, the unpredictable nature of Hargrove's response hung still in the air. Would he rally behind Thomas's suggestion, or would it be crushed under the weight of corporate tradition? Thomas's heart raced, filled with both hope and apprehension, standing at the precipice of a potential shift in the very fabric of their organization. The stakes were escalating, and as his mind raced through the possibilities, one crucial question remained unanswered. What would it take to fully convince a man fiercely committed to traditional norms to open up to a new, more humane strategy? The moment of truth loomed near, and the potential for revelation hung thick in the atmosphere, beckoning him to confront the ultimate decision head-on. The room held its breath as Hargrove's deliberation stretched on, the weight of expectations palpable. Thomas could feel the anticipation from Jenna and Lisa, their eyes pleading for progress, a signal of subconscious solidarity. He nodded slightly in their direction, drawing strength from their unspoken support. "All right, let's entertain this pilot project," Hargrove finally conceded, his tone a mix of begrudging respect and sharpened skepticism. "But know this, if it goes south, it will fall squarely on your shoulders, Thomas." Thomas's heart pounded as he absorbed Hargrove's words. It was a dangerous agreement offered at the edge of a knife, and though it felt like a victory, it also carried with it the weight of potential failure. The stakes were outlined clearly. One misstep, and all of this could unravel. "Thank you," Thomas managed to reply, a hint of gratitude wrapping around the steel of determination that fortified his resolve. "I'll work on the details for an outline and schedule a follow-up meeting. I believe we can design something impactful." As he left the room, a whirlwind of thoughts churned within him. He needed to build a solid framework, something that would resonate with the board, addressing hard metrics while simultaneously advocating for emotional engagement. Little did he know that this challenge would peel back layers of his own skills he had yet to discover. Back at his desk, Thomas found the quiet hum of his office both comforting and overwhelming. He sifted through his notes from the meeting, scribbled ideas tumbling from his mind like loose change. A pilot project. What would that look like? He started drafting potential initiatives, employee check-ins, feedback loops, client outreach programs. Each word felt charged with promise and threat. But as excitement coursed through his veins, he clawed back the doubts that threatened to overwhelm him. What if the resolved foundation crumbled under an avalanche of financial coldness? He forced himself to focus, digging deeper. He realized that he had to engage with his colleagues more. It wouldn't be enough to merely present outcomes. He needed their buy-in, their passion to match his own. After all, it wasn't just Hargrove he had to convince. It was a collective belief that together they could foster a new strategy that resonated emotionally while yielding fiscal success. Thomas began to draft a presentation that would blend qualitative and quantitative data. He collected anecdotes from employees and testimonials from clients, weaving stories that highlighted successes stemming from connection. Could stories of promise and hope sway even the most hardened skeptics? He was determined to find out. As he worked late into the evening, a flickering lamp illuminated his path. Slowly, he began to see the contours of his project emerge from chaos. It felt like unearthing a dormant part of himself, the ability to inspire and beckon toward something greater. For the first time, he recognized that he wasn't just an administrator, he was a bridge builder, connecting human experience to corporate structure. Then, an unsettling refrain circulated in the back of his mind. What if his plan fell on deaf ears? How would he respond when faced with a wall of skepticism in the boardroom? The narrative he was constructing needed conviction, a steadfast belief that transcended numbers. He pressed on, piecing together his argument when it struck him. His untested charisma and ability to engage could propel this initiative. But would they be enough to withstand the intricate web of distrust that corporate inertia had spun? He had to confront that fear head-on. In inhaling the depth of responsibility, he was driven to stand up, not just for his beliefs, but for those who worked alongside him, who might wonder if their voices mattered in this equation. The next day, a tight knot twisted in his stomach as he presented his ideas to Hargrove, and he sensed that the validation of his effort rested on a precarious ledge. If he could illustrate potential beyond mere analytics, he could pave the path. Thomas clutched the edge of the podium, the sunlight spilling across his workspace and igniting a tenacity within him. But even as he began to speak, the uncertainty loomed like a spectre, whispering fears of objection and dismissal. The time had come to face Hargrove, and ultimately his own doubts about emerging as a compelling leader in an unforgiving corporate landscape. Could he muster not just the courage to present his vision, but to reshape the very fabric of their operational reality? With every heartbeat sounding in his ears, he readied himself for the confrontation that awaited. Under the fluorescent glow of the conference room lights, Thomas stood at the front, a projection screen illuminating behind him like a beacon of potential. Nervous energy coursed through him as he glanced at Hargrove, arms crossed, watching intently, while the rest of the team shifted in their seats, anticipation hanging heavily in the air. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears as he reminded himself of what had driven this initiative. Maya's unfiltered aspiration for a connection, the simplicity of childhood dreams, and the awakening realization that success was more than just figures on a spreadsheet. Beyond the realm of commerce, he could forge a legacy rooted in human connection, empathy, and authenticity. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice steady, yet feeling the weight of the moment. "Today, I'm excited to present a pilot project concept that intertwines our company values with a commitment to emotional engagement, a campaign that can redefine our very essence in the marketplace." He paused, gauging their reactions. Small murmurs rippled through the room as he invoked short anecdotes, weaving statistics and stories to breathe life into his message. He illustrated the dramatic impact of building relationships within client interactions, how emotionally connected clients feed positive references that echo back to increased revenues, fostering community perceptions around their brand. As he spoke, he incorporated testimonials from employees and clients alike, amplifying the nuanced yet tangible effects that authenticity and connection cultivate in the business realm. Each narrative ricocheted off the walls, compelling attention onward. He could feel Hargrove's skepticism wavering, edging towards curiosity instead. "Imagine shifting our focus from just quarterly profits to consistently fostering relationships," Thomas implored, "to aligning our goals with the human stories that define our community. This is not just a strategy, it's a movement towards sustainable growth born from empathy." In a moment of vulnerability, he shared a personal story about Maya, the same child who had inspired him to challenge the status quo. "A week ago, she expressed to me her fears of not being enough, her feelings of inadequacy. It made me realize how we can often overlook the emotional thread that binds us, not only in personal relationships, but within the corporate framework as well." The room fell silent, eyes reflecting a mixture of contemplation and resonance. Hargrove's brow furrowed slightly as he considered not just the business implications, but the potential ripples of transformative change surrounding emotional presence within their corporate identity. "Would we be able to take strides to make this happen?" Jenna asked boldly, her voice cutting through the tension. "How do we start?" "Yes," Thomas replied, buoyed by her forthrightness. "We'll outline specific initiatives, such as employee-focused check-ins, incorporating feedback loops, and initiatives to enhance client relations. But I encourage you all to weigh in. This can only succeed if we collaborate." The discussion unfolded beautifully from there. Questions arose, ideas flourished, and hesitations morphed into enthusiasm. Each team member began to see the potential in Thomas's vision, a genuine shift in their corporate culture, one that extended beyond the confines of balance sheets into the authentic experiences of those they served. Time slipped into a fluid moment of innovation and possibility. Midway through, Thomas felt a wave of optimism swell within him, igniting his passion for the project he was fostering. This was no longer solely a business imperative, it became a testament to what he had unlocked through personal growth, a profound emotional connection that could ripple throughout their operations. With renewed energy, they collaboratively refined the goals and timeline for the pilot project, articulating measurable outcomes they could present to the board. Thomas answered myriad queries, addressing concerns about feasibility and sustainability, each response fortifying his resolve. As they concluded, Hargrove finally offered a nod. "You might be onto something here, Thomas, but let's remain realistic. We'll need results. This initiative will be expected to yield measurable outcomes." "Absolutely," Thomas replied, clarity blazing in his eyes. "This is merely the beginning, and together we will track every metric. The data will reflect our journey through this pilot, an empirical testament to the transformative power of emotional engagement." The meeting adjourned, but the work was just beginning. As they exited together, exhilaration pulsed through the team, a shared commitment solidifying among them. For the first time, Thomas felt the strong currents of collective hope surrounding their mission. Weeks transformed into months as the pilot took root. Together they navigated through trials and tribulations, re-evaluating strategies, gathering feedback, and cultivating relationships built on the respect and trust they had once overlooked. The results were promising: a noticeable uptick in employee satisfaction ratings, client testimonials that glowed with heartfelt engagement, and the remarkable realization that this approach created direct financial benefits as well. As the end of the pilot loomed and results were compiled, a sense of accomplishment enveloped him. Thomas stood tall, not just as an executive businessman, but as a transformed man, a father, a leader, a visionary, determined to change the landscape around him. During the closing presentation to the board, Thomas's heart raced, but nerves transformed into certainty, grounded in the validation of their shared efforts. He presented not just numbers and facts, but intertwined human stories that fueled stakeholder engagement. The board was visibly moved, the tangible evidence of the pilot yielding a fusion of profitability and humanity. Success felt like an exquisite new definition, one intertwined with connection, and the affirmation he received was undeniable. They voted unanimously to integrate the project into the company's core strategy. By the time the meeting concluded, a prevailing sense of pride coursed through him, a recognition of his hard-earned transformation. He had melded who he was as a person with the leader he aspired to become, and emerged not only as a father to Maya, but as a figure laden with purpose, successively dismantling an archaic corporate culture while building lasting familial bonds. That evening he returned home and found Maya curled up on the couch, sketching whimsical images well beyond her years. He joined her, snuggling close, knowing that time together meant more than material things. He reveled in how their relationship had flourished right alongside his professional achievements, bound together by a common thread of authenticity. As she looked up with her innocent smile, bursting with joy, he knew, without a shadow of doubt, that he was her dad now. He had conquered not only the challenges of professional ambition, but also forged an unbreakable connection that would last a lifetime. This was the moment he had aimed for, fulfilled, self-aware, proud. And with that sentiment etched in his heart, he embraced each day aware of what true success had become. Don't wait even one more second to share this triumphant journey. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Thomas's incredible transformation and the impact of genuine connection. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your true support can empower others on their paths to personal growth.